Hi, today we have two books to read to you. One is There's No Such Thing as a Dragon, and the other one is Good Night, Good Night. So let's begin.
Okay.
Billy Bixby was rather surprised when he woke up one morning and found a dragon in his room. It was a small dragon, about the size of a kitten. The dragon wagged its tail happily when Billy patted its head. Billy went downstairs to tell his mother. "There's no such thing as a dragon," said Billy's mother, and she said it like she meant it. Billy went back to his room and began to dress. The dragon came close to Billy and wagged its tail, but Billy didn't pat it. If there's no such thing as something, it's silly to pat it on the head. Billy washed his face and hands and went down to breakfast. The dragon went along. It was bigger now, almost the size of a dog. Billy sat down at the table. The dragon sat down on the table. This sort of thing was not usually permitted, but there wasn't much Billy's mother could do about it. She had already said there was no such thing as a dragon, and if there's no such thing, you can't tell it to get down off the table. Mother made some pancakes for Billy, but the dragon ate them all. Mother made some more, but the dragon ate those too. Mother kept making pancakes until she ran out of batter. Billy only got one of them, but he said that was all he really wanted anyway. Billy went upstairs to brush his teeth. Mother started cleaning the table. The dragon, who was quite as big as Mother by this time, made himself comfortable on the hall rug and went to sleep. By the time Billy came downstairs, the dragon had grown so much he filled the hall. Billy had to go round by way of the living room to get to where his mother was. "I didn't know dragons grew so fast," said Billy. "There's no such thing as a dragon," said Mother firmly. Cleaning the downstairs took Mother all morning, what with the dragon in the way, and having to climb in and out of windows to get from room to room. By noon, the dragon filled the house. Its head hung out the front door, its tail hung out the back door, and there wasn't a room in the house that didn't have some part of the dragon in it. When the dragon awoke from his nap, he was hungry. A bakery truck went by. The smell of fresh bread was more than the dragon could resist. The dragon ran down the street after the bakery truck. The house went along, of course, like the shell on a snail. The mailman was just coming up the path with some mail for the Bixbys when their house rushed past him and headed down the street. He chased the Bixbys' house for a few blocks, but he couldn't catch it. When Mr. Bixby came home for lunch, the first thing he noticed was that the house was gone. Luckily, one of the neighbors was able to tell him which way it went. Mr. Bixby got in his car and went looking for the house. He studied all the houses as he drove along. Finally, he saw one that looked familiar. Billy and Mrs. Bixby were waving from an upstairs window. Mr. Bixby climbed over the dragon's head, onto the porch roof, and through the upstairs window. "How did this happen?" Mr. Bixby asked. "It was the dragon," said Billy. "There's no such thing," Mother started to say. "There is a dragon," Billy insisted. "A very big dragon." And Billy patted the dragon on its head. The dragon wagged its tail happily. Then, even faster than it had grown, the dragon started getting smaller. Soon, it was kitten size again. "I don't mind dragons this size," said Mother. "Why did it have to grow so big?" "I'm not sure," said Billy, "but I think it just wanted to be noticed." Good night. Good night. Once there were 3 little dragons. They lived in a dark cave. The cave was in a dense forest. The forest was in a faraway kingdom. The poor little dragons were very lonely in their deep, dark cave. In the kingdom there was a good knight. Every night he kept watch. He watched from a crumbly, tumbly tower. It was on top of a very tall wall. One night, the good knight was on watch. He heard a very large, very loud roar. So the good knight left the crumbly, tumbly tower. He climbed down the very tall wall. He jumped on his horse. "Away!" he said. He galloped through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He came to the deep, dark cave. Inside, he saw the first little dragon. "What's this?" he asked. "Methinks it is a dragon." And he drew his shimmery, glimmery sword. The dragon had on his jammies. He was all ready for bed. "Oh, good, you've come," said the dragon. "Could you bring me a drink of water, please? Then I can go to sleep." The good knight did not know what to think, but he was a good knight, so he got a drink of water. He gave it to the dragon. Then he tucked him into bed. "Good night, good dragon. Sleep well, sleep tight," said the good knight. Then he galloped away. The good knight went back through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He got off his horse. Thud! He climbed up the very tall wall to the crumbly-tumbly tower. There he stood on watch. He stood on watch for 5 minutes. Then he heard another very large, very loud roar. "I don't believe this," he said. He left the crumbly-tumbly tower. He climbed down the very tall wall. He jumped onto his horse. "Away!" he cried. He galloped through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He came to the deep, dark cave. The second dragon was in her jammies. She was all ready for bed. "Oh, good, you've come," said the second dragon. "Could you read me a story, please? Then I can go to sleep." "And could I have another drink of water?" said the first dragon. The good knight did not know what to think, but he was a good knight, so he read the dragon a story, then he tucked her into bed. He got the first dragon another drink of water, then he tucked him into bed. "Good night, good dragons. Sleep well, sleep tight," said the good knight. Then he galloped away. The good knight went back through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He got off his horse. Thud! He climbed up the very tall wall to the crumbly-tumbly tower. There he stood on watch. He stood on watch for 2 minutes. Then he heard another, very large, very loud, roar. "This is too much," he said. He left the crumbly-tumbly tower. He climbed down the very tall wall. He jumped on his horse. "Away!" he cried. He galloped through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He came to the deep, dark cave. The third dragon had on his jammies. He was all ready for bed. "Oh, good, you've come," said the third dragon. "Could you sing me a song, please? Then I can go to sleep." "And could you read me another story?" said the second dragon. "And could you get me another drink of water?" said the first dragon. The good knight did not know what to think, but he was a good knight, so he sang the dragon a song. Then he tucked him into bed. He read the second dragon another story. Then he tucked her into bed. He got the first dragon another drink of water. Then he tucked him into bed. "Good night, good dragons. Sleep well, sleep tight," said the good knight. Then he galloped away. The good knight went back through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He got off his horse. Thud! He climbed up the very tall wall to the crumbly-tumbly tower. There he stood on watch. He stood on watch for 1 minute. Then he heard the largest, loudest roar of all. "Not again," he said. He left the crumbly-tumbly tower. He climbed down the very tall wall. He jumped on his horse. "Away!" he cried. He galloped through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He came to the deep, dark cave. "Oh, good, you've come," said all 3 dragons. "Let me guess," said the good knight. "Another drink of water?" "No," said the first dragon. "Another story?" "No," said the second dragon. "Another song?" "No," said the third dragon. "Then what do you want?" cried the good knight. "We need a good night kiss," said the little dragons, and they lifted their scaly little cheeks. "This is going too far," said the good knight. But he was a good knight, so he bent and kissed each scaly little cheek. "Good night, good dragons. Sleep well, sleep tight," he said. The dragons said, "Good night, good night." The good knight left the cave. He waited outside. He heard the loud dragon snores. Then the good knight went home through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He got off his horse. Thud! "Now," said the good knight, "maybe I can get a good night's sleep." And that is just what he did. Sleep well, sleep tight, good night. Harley and I hope you've enjoyed our dragon stories today. We really loved reading to you. Bye.